Okay, this is Federalist 29, Part 3. In order to cast an odium upon the power of calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, it has been remarked that there is nowhere any provision in the proposed Constitution for calling posse comitatus to assist the magistrate in the execution of his duty, whence it has been inferred that the military force was intended to be his only auxiliary. The posse comitatus is when you are a magistrate, you are a state official, or you're a federal official of sorts, and you legally enable an average citizen to help you in a military way, or in times of emergency. Remember, if you have seen some of these Western movies, a sheriff says, I want to get a posse and go after this killer, because all he has is only one deputy, maybe, if even he has that. So that's what this thing is. There is a striking incoherence in the objections which have appeared, and sometimes even from the same quarters, not much calculated to inspire a very favorable opinion of the sincerity or fair dealing of their authors. The same person who tells us in one breath that the powers of the federal government will be despotic and unlimited, inform us in the next that it has not authority sufficient enough to call out the posse comitatus. The latter, unfortunately, is as much short of the truth as the former exceeds it. It would be as absurd to doubt that a right to pass all laws necessary and proper to execute its declared powers would include that of requiring the assistance of the citizens to the officers who may be entrusted with the execution of those laws. First, because the laws and things related to posse comitatus has changed, just make sure you look it up yourself and take a look at it, see what they say about it right now. And also here again, he brings it to your attention here in this paragraph that he says, just like I said, they'll complain when we say we want to have a small professional army, but we have to use your militia, and they'll complain when we say we want to make a larger professional army but not use the militia. He says, well, either way they're complaining to us. And then he says this little part that's kind of from the Constitution itself, that in the Constitution it is written that when the time comes, when it's necessary, that a right to pass all laws necessary and proper to execute its declared powers. In other words, in the Constitution, we've given power to the people, to the Congress, to do whatever it takes to get the laws executed, to get the laws respected, to do its job. Okay, let me repeat this last part. It would be as absurd to doubt that a right to pass all laws necessary and proper to execute its declared powers would include that of requiring the assistance of the citizens to the officers who may be entrusted with the execution of those laws, as it would be to believe that a right to enact laws necessary and proper for the imposition and collection of taxes would involve that of varying the rules of descent and of the alienation of landed property, or of abolishing the trial by jury in cases relating to it. So he says these people are just imagining too many things. They're just negative. They're not trustful. Remember in the first part of this Federalist, I said that Hamilton is just a little mad at these people who are criticizing. And it shows it in this paper, just the tone of his language. It being therefore evident that the supposition of a want of power to require the aid of the posse comitatus is entirely destitute of color, it will follow that the conclusion which has been drawn from it in its application to the authority of the federal government over the militia is as uncandid as it is illogical. What reason could there be to infer that force was intended to be the sole instrument of authority, merely because there is a power to make use of it when necessary? What shall we think of the motives which could induce men of sense to reason in this manner? How shall we prevent a conflict between charity and conviction? By a curious refinement upon the spirit of republican jealousy, we are even taught to apprehend danger from the militia itself in the hands of the federal government. It is observed that select corps may be formed, composed of the young and ardent, who may be rendered subservient to the views of arbitrary power. What plan for the regulation of militia may be pursued by the national government is impossible to be foreseen. But so far from viewing the matter in the same light with those who object to select corps as dangerous, were the Constitution ratified, and were I to deliver my sentiments to a member of the federal legislature from this state on the subject of a militia establishment, I shall hold him in substance the following discourse. So again, he's saying all these criticisms are crazy because one day they say you're going to make a special corps, a special division, big division or special group of soldiers and train them to put down anything in any state that the federal government doesn't like. He says this cannot be done, and here he's going to say that if I were to say something to one of these lawmakers, this is what I would say to them. The project of disciplining all the militia of the United States is as futile as it would be injurious if it were capable of being carried into execution. A tolerable expertness in military movements is a business that requires time and practice. It is not a day or even a week that will suffice for the attainment of it. To oblige the great body of yeomanry and of the other classes of citizens to be under arms for the purpose of going through military exercises and evolutions as often as might be necessary to acquire the degree of perfection which would entitle them to the character of a well-regulated militia, would be a real grievance to the people and a serious public inconvenience and loss. It would form an annual deduction from the productive labor of the country to an amount which, calculating upon the present number of people, would not fall far short of the whole expense of the civil establishments of all the states. To attempt a thing which would abridge the mass of labor and industry to so considerable an extent would be unwise, and the experiment, if made, could not succeed because it would not long be endured. Little more can reasonably be aimed at with respect to the people at large than to have them properly armed and equipped. And in order to see that this be not neglected, it will be necessary to assemble them once or twice in the course of a year. So again, he's talking about that uniformly training all the militia, that to be used in times of emergency, and this is going to be done in a way that they can actually help when the time comes. You can't train them in a day or two. So he says the federal government will set up rules that this training can be done, so it would be advantageous to everybody. Because he says, look, it's better to do it this way. It's safer, it works better, and also it saves a lot of money for people of different states. Because if different states had their militia, they were to train them individually, then you will take all these men from their farms, from their family, and just to train them, and all that training takes away from the productive force of the country. So it's best for us to have a small professional army at the federal government level, and then have training, a uniform training for this militia, so that at the time of emergency we could use them, and this way it would cost the people of the state much less to have these people trained and ready for emergencies. So he says this way we can have best of both worlds. Whereas if we had 13 different states, 13 different militias, 13 different budgets to support them, train them, that would be crazy. Okay, we'll follow in the next video.